My completely naked wife threw her leg over her lover. They definitely didn't think I would walk in on them at that moment. My name is Jason. I am 36 years old, and I live in a small house in North Carolina. I work as a paramedic doctor. My life has never been easy, especially with such a schedule. Shifts of 12 to 14 hours, night calls, blood, screams, fatigue. All of this has become part of my daily life. But I always knew who I was doing it for. My wife, Melissa, she is 34. We met 10 years ago at a mutual friend's wedding. I had just completed my internship then. She was working as a junior consultant in an interior design salon. She had an infectious smile and a kind of wild sparkle in her eyes. The kind that quickly attracts but can also burn. We got married 2 years after we met. At first, everything was like in a good movie. Travels, spontaneous dinners, laughter in the evenings. Then our first daughter, Ellie, was born. 3 years later, the younger one, Haley. I turned out to be a good father. I did everything to ensure my girls wanted for nothing. Even on the toughest shifts, I would come home with a toy or something sweet just to see their happy faces. Melissa stayed home when Ellie was born. She didn't want to go back to work, and I didn't insist. My income allowed us to live without much difficulty. She had friends, her mom, gym classes, courses of something or other that I never really understood. I worked, she raised the kids, and took care of herself. Over time, I began to notice that there were fewer conversations between us. When I came home, she would just say, "You're tired? Not now. Let's not talk about it." In bed, a rarity, almost a formality. But I always attributed it to everyday life. Kids, fatigue, well, it happens. The main thing is we're together, I thought. We're a family. Melissa often said that it was hard for her alone with the kids, while I was saving lives in the ICU. Sometimes she spoke with irony, sometimes with resentment. I couldn't always respond, because I was too tired. I just stayed silent. I looked at her, felt that something was changing, but didn't want to believe it could be something serious. The turning point didn't start with a thunderclap out of a clear sky, but with a child's phrase. It was an ordinary Sunday. I was getting ready for a day shift when Ellie came up to me and asked about Uncle Scott. She wanted to know if he would come today to give Mom a massage. I stopped and froze, only asking, "Who is Uncle Scott?" "Well, our neighbor. He said it makes Mom feel good when he touches her back." Ellie smiled and ran off, not realizing she had just destroyed an entire universe inside me. Scott lived a couple of houses down. His wife passed away a year ago. We sometimes helped him, brought him food, invited him to celebrations. I even felt sympathy for him. The guy was clearly going through a tough time. But a massage? Pleasant? I didn't make a scene. I just started observing more closely. Melissa started saying more often that she wanted to be home alone. She asked to take the girls to her mom's for the weekend, saying she needed to recharge. At first I believed her, but then it became a pattern. One day I came home a little earlier than I had promised. My shift ended an hour early. I decided to surprise her. I entered quietly. The house was silent. In the kitchen, there was only one cup, with 2 lipstick marks, and a plate with crumbs. In the sink, there was a spoon with traces of honey. Someone had eaten here recently, but the children were no longer home. I went upstairs. Silence. But there were wet footprints on the bathroom floor. Where from? I wondered. No one was supposed to be taking a bath. The washing machine was running, and inside was a sheet rolled into a ball. The next day, I specifically take time off work under the pretext of feeling unwell. I sit in the car and watch the house from a distance. And after an hour and a half, I see Scott coming out of our gate, looking around, and quickly leaving. Without unnecessary words, I felt something starting to press in my chest. I wasn't ready for anything, but I already understood that something was wrong here. very wrong. And I must find out the whole truth. After I saw Scott coming out of our yard, something inside me snapped. It wasn't just suspicion, it was fear that began to take shape. I didn't start yelling at anyone, didn't make a scene. I just stopped sleeping. I lay down next to her, heard her breathing, how she twitched in her sleep, and thought about who she was with that day. I started to feel as if everything I built, every day, every year, was just slowly rotting from the inside. And no one but me notices it. A couple of days later, I approached the senior doctor and asked for a Sunday shift. And then I just didn't show up. I left the car a block away from home, sat in the cabin, and just waited. I didn't know anything for sure, but inside, I already understood everything. My fingers trembled, even when I was just holding a bottle of water. I kept running the scenario through my head, hoping I was wrong. I wanted it all to be paranoia, a figment of my imagination, exhaustion. But reality turned out to be far worse than any assumption. Around noon, I noticed Melissa peek out the window, adjust her hair, and close the curtains. 15 minutes later, a car stopped by the house. Scott! He didn't even hide. He walked slowly, confidently. She met him at the door, and I don't know what was in her eyes because I couldn't see. But she allowed him to enter, without hesitation. I waited for about 20 minutes. Too long to just say hello. He quietly approached the house through the backyard. I listened. You could hear it in the house, only a faint humming sound of music. He walked around the side of the house and stopped by the kitchen window. The curtains were drawn. I saw them sitting in the living room. She was leaning on him. He was holding her by the hip as if he had done it many times before. I couldn't take it, and went back to the car. It seemed to me that there was a buzzing in my head, as if from high voltage vibrations. I sat and stared at the windshield, unblinking. When I approached the house again, about 30 minutes later, it was quiet inside, but the curtains were still drawn. I opened the door with my key and stepped into the hallway. Everything was as usual, except for the smell. In the air was different, no longer ours. I went inside. The bathroom was not far from the living room, and when I took a couple of steps, I heard quiet moans. At that moment, my heart was beating so loudly that I could barely hear my own footsteps. I approached closer, stopped in front of the door, and then I heard her whisper his name. Not mine, not for love, not in a fit of pain, just and with pleasure. I didn't wait. I suddenly opened the door and saw their faces. They turned towards me. She was standing in front of him, completely naked, with her leg thrown over his arm. Fear flashed across her face, as if she realized for the first time that she could be seen. I looked at them. I didn't scream, only emptiness. I threw a pre-prepared envelope on the floor for her and said that I wouldn't interfere anymore. After that, I didn't say a word. I just left. The car was parked nearby. Opon! I got in, started the engine, and drove away. That evening, I turned off my phone. Completely. I didn't want to hear her voice. Didn't want to see her tears. I knew that now she would beg, make excuses, come up with things. But all I needed is necessary silence. I went to my old friend Trevor, who knew I would only come if everything fell apart. He didn't ask anything. He just put a beer on the table and said I could stay as long as I needed. After 5 days, I turned on my phone. Over 100 missed calls, several hundred messages. Some were pleas for forgiveness, others were reproaches, some were threats. At first, I just scrolled through all of it without reading, then eventually started opening them. It was important for me to see how she was breaking down, how she was frantic, trying to save what she herself had burned. When I finally returned home, the kids were at her mother's. Melissa was waiting for me, pale, with red eyes. She started talking about a difficult period, lack of attention, time, about weakness. I just remained silent. Then I said that in a week we would file for divorce. She tried to stop me, saying that we have children, that I had no right, that everything could be restored. But there was no doubt in my eyes anymore. I don't know if she understood that or not, but there was no turning back. A week passed. I didn't talk to Melissa, only briefly answered questions about the children. I slept poorly. Everything seemed to be falling apart, as if the ground beneath my feet was slowly cracking, but with certainty. I met with a lawyer, told him everything I knew, showed him messages, photos, even a note from the therapist where I was prescribed a sedative after an emotional breakdown. I was gathering everything piece by piece. I involved my sister. She helped with the paperwork. We drafted a statement. I signed it, and the lawyer filed the documents in court. That was the first time I felt relief. Not even relief, but emptiness. As if I had been cut in half. But I kept moving forward because I couldn't do otherwise. At one of the court hearings, at the very beginning, Melissa came in a formal business suit with her hair tied back, pretending to be composed. She tried to blame everything on fatigue, stress, my coldness. She talked about how hard it was for her to be alone, how I supposedly wasn't interested in her inner world. Her lawyer was sharp and at times even aggressive. They tried to undermine me, to show that I wasn't sufficiently present in the family. I held myself back, but inside everything was boiling, as if that wasn't enough. The day before the second hearing, I got a call from the hospital. Mom. Heart attack. I broke down there immediately, but I didn't make it in time. When I arrived, the doctors had just come out of the room and shook their heads. That's it. The end. My mom meant everything to me. She didn't interfere in our marriage, but she was always there. She saw how I was slowly fading in recent months and knew something was happening. But she never pressured me. She just patted my shoulder and said, "You're strong, Jason. Don't lose yourself." I stood by her body and felt that I was losing not just family. I'm losing the very ground under my feet. The world in which I knew who I was and why I lived began to crumble. Like wet paper, I came to the next hearing with a black ribbon on my jacket. The lawyer asked to postpone the session, but I refused. I wanted to see this case through to the end. In court, I sat without looking at Melissa, just listening to how she repeatedly shifted the blame, complained about how she was playing to the audience. Her voice seemed nauseatingly fake to me, but at some point, something changed. She approached me after the session in the corridor. Her eyes were red, and she held crumpled tissues in her hands. And for the first time, during all this time, there was no play in her voice. She simply said, "Oh, that she ruined everything. She knows. But she wants it all to end. But not in the way I want it to. She can't let it go, she can't handle it. She only asks that I stop everything." At that moment I didn't respond. I just looked at her. It hurt even to breathe. Sitting in the car, I lingered for a long time. I couldn't move from the spot, but eventually I drove away. The next day, I met with the lawyer. I said that I want to postpone the filing. Not cancel it, just a pause. I knew I was making a mistake, but inside everything was so broken that I didn't know what to hold on to, except for the familiar life. I stayed for her, for the children, for the memory of my mother, and for myself. To be honest, I just wasn't ready to completely lose everything at once. We didn't get divorced. I stayed. At first, I just lived nearby, emotionally detached, as if in an empty house. I slept on the couch for a few weeks. She tried to be attentive, brewed my favorite coffee, asked to talk, looked for reasons to touch, but I was cold. I couldn't forget what I saw. I couldn't get her moans out of my head, which I heard in the bathroom. The children didn't understand anything. They were just happy that we were together again, together in our home. It was the only light that kept me going. I started taking days off more often, walked with them in the park, built blanket forts, and did everything to make them feel loved. They shouldn't suffer for her choices. Melissa tried to change. She went to a psychologist, said that she was working on herself. Sometimes I heard her crying in the bathroom, and I understood that maybe she really felt guilty. Maybe she was just afraid of losing stability. I never understood. We lived as if the old life had died, and a new, unfamiliar one had begun, anxious, yet outwardly calm. I'm not sure if this can be called happiness, more like a truce. I still don't know how long it will last. But for now, I'm here, next to my daughters, for them and for myself. Thank you for watching our video to the end. You can also watch our previous videos on the channel. Don't forget to subscribe and set up notifications. That way you won't miss any stories we release. Thank you, and see you soon.